Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, October 18th, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting. Roll call.
Supervisor Christie.
Here.
Supervisor Grijalva. Here. Supervisor Hines.
Here.
Supervisor Scott. Chair Bronson.
Here. And let the record show Supervisor Scott is unable to join us today. He's traveling.
And Supervisor Hines is participating remotely. All other board members are present.
All right. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to be offered today by Supervisor Grijalva.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yo le doy mi altar a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América, la república que representa una nación bajo Dios indivisible con libertad y justicia para todos.
Thank you, Supervisor. And for the, who have we got for the acknowledgement statement? It's going to be offered by Dr. Teshia Solomon, Associate Professor of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Arizona. It's a video display.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tisha Solomon. I am Choctaw from Oklahoma. I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Arizona. I am the director of the American Indian Research Center for Health and an outreach distinguished professor. So I would like to say on behalf of Pima County residents, we honor the tribal nations who have served as caretakers of this land from time immemorial and respectfully acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Dana Alpha Nation and the multi-millennial presence of the Pasquayagi tribe within Pima County. Consistent with Pima County's commitment to diversity and inclusion, we strive toward building equal partner relationships with Arizona's tribal nations.
Thank you very much. All right, now we move on. Before we move on, I just want to remind everybody that at Call to the Public, we would please request that you if you're participating telephonically, you need to contact the clerk's office by the deadline listed on the agenda. Each speaker must complete a speaker card and will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. When you are called to speak, step forward to the podium, state your name for the record, direct comments to the board. Speakers should adhere to the rules of civility, refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. And as chair, I reserve the right to have attendees to this meeting removed. Attendees are advised that our board strongly adheres to the rules of civility and decorum. Outbursts, breaches of the peace, boisterous conduct, or other unlawful interference will result in attendees being given a warning, and if not heeded, you will be asked to leave the meeting room. All right, and then also we are going to today, given we have only 4 board members here, all our votes will be by roll call. And I want to remind my fellow colleagues that you looking at our rules, and no member may leave the board chamber during session without permission of the chair. We didn't do that our last session, and the board chambers consist of the hearing room, the members' dais, and the executive chamber. And again, so we don't violate open meeting laws, and we understand who's voting and how they're voting from now on, our votes will be by roll call. And with that, I think we have several changes to the agenda, at least one. On page 5, item 20, Development Services. It's a rezoning, P22RZ0001, Tucson School District Number 1, South Cardinal Avenue. The applicant is requesting this item be continued to the Board of Supervisors meeting November 1st. If there are no objections, the agenda will so be amended. And we actually get to the best part of the board meeting.
Madam
now.
Chair?
Supervisor.
May I take a quick moment of personal?
Certainly.
I just want to acknowledge Deputy County Administrator DeBonis and County Administrator Lesher for their very quick and responsive help ensuring that flagpoles were installed and raised at both the Vale, Esmond Station Library, and the Sahuarita Library. For some unknown reason, maybe supply chain or whatever happened, those two items were overlooked. We got a number of constituent concerns about it, and the two of you jumped on that issue and got it taken care of, and for doing so, my constituents and I are very much appreciative for your diligence in making sure that that happens. So thank you on behalf of our district and our libraries. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. We now move on to item 4 on our regular agenda. Pause for pause. There's a video being provided, I am told, and it looks like we've got the video up.
Hi everyone, my name is Kaylee Murdoch. I'm the Public Information Officer here at PAC. And today for Pause, I wanted to introduce you to my friend Roger. Roger is just 2 years old, but he's already spent several months of his life in the shelter. The reason for that is that Roger has some anxiety in his kennel, so he jumps and spins, and that tends to kind of turn adopters away. But as you can see, Roger is a really calm, easygoing dog once he's out of the shelter. He's really social, he's really sweet, and he's just an easy guy to get along with. He's a great reminder of why we should not judge dogs based on their kennel behavior, but based on the way that they act once they're out of the shelter. Right now, we still have more than 500 dogs at the shelter, like Roger, who are waiting to find their forever homes. In particular, we've seen a lot of moms and puppies come in lately, so we're definitely always looking for fosters who can take on moms and babies. Any spare room is fine to keep them in, and Mom really does all the hard work. You just get to enjoy the cuteness. Remember, if you want to see our available pets or learn more about our services, please go to www.pima.gov/animalcare, or just come on down to the shelter to see some of the amazing work that's being done here. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So now we move on to call to the public. And again, we have several people joining us telephonically, but want to remind everybody that if you wanted to join us telephonically, you had to reach us by October 17th at 5 p.m. There are several people who reached us after the deadline, so they will not be speaking today. But we do have two joining us online. Our first speaker is Dr. Joanne DeFilippo, and she's joining us telephonically. Are you available?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Bronson and Supervisors. What I wanted to address for a couple items. The first one is that issue of the violation of open meeting law, et cetera, because I do want to clarify that, and I want to thank you, Chair Bronson, for taking the action that you have done today in mandating the individual roll call on the vote. But what I want to clarify for the listeners, specifically the taxpayers, is that when any supervisor, in this case I'm referring specifically to Hines and Scott, when they leave the dais, what they violate are the Pima County rules that were adopted in 2020. And there's a section in there, it might be section G, I believe, which states specifically you cannot leave the dais without prior approval from the chair. When they leave the dais and they do not ask you, Chair Bronson, for approval, what ends up happening, generally speaking, is that it would trigger the violation on the open meeting law because the minutes would not be reflecting accurately of what's going on. So, are Hines and Scott in violation of open meeting law? No, they're in violation of the Pima County Supervisors Board. The onus of the violation falls on the chair and the clerk of the board. So I want to correct that, and I do hope that in the future, Hines and Scott will pay tribute to the taxpayers, follow the guidelines, the rules, as well as give both you, Chair Bronson, and the clerk of the board the courtesy of being respectful enough to adhere to these rules so that you are not placed in a position of jeopardizing open meeting laws. The other thing I want to address today is the homeless shelter issue that's on the agenda. And Chair Bronson, I have specifically a question for you, which I'd like you to address today. And that is, are we really building a viable, gigantic homeless shelter? Or are we looking at addressing homelessness issues with successful outcomes? Because from the material that's presented, it is very dubious to see if there are going to be successful outcomes coming from this. So I want to thank you today, Chair Bronson, for all the work that you've done in trying to get this issue of open meeting laws corrected, as well as please address this issue on the homeless shelters. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to our next speaker, joining us telephonically, Christine Bowserman.
For your main course, you have a craft stopped lobster, and for the ladies, you get it. So we have.
We're having difficulty hearing you. Ma'am, we're having difficulty hearing you.
New Angel song, now 20% thicker.
All right, I will try to see if we can get reconnected. We'll come back, but now we'll proceed to call to the public from the audience attending today. First individual is Kevin Daly.
My name is Kevin Daly. Good morning, Supervisors. 9 weeks ago, after seeing no coordinated regional response to the unprecedented level of crime tearing apart our community and the rampant human tragedy fentanyl is having, we formed the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition of Businesses and Neighborhoods that has grown to 860 members in 9 weeks to raise the level of awareness to our elected leaders. In our city and county, employers and employees and citizens are feeling more unsafe than ever in history. Aggressive panhandling, trespassers using drugs at the doorsteps of businesses, leaving urine and feces that discourage customers from patronizing our local businesses. Citizens are having their cars broken into, items stolen off doorsteps, and homes burgled. Businesses, our source of jobs that fuel our economy, are spending tens of thousands of dollars on security and fencing. They are experiencing losses due to unchecked theft, shoplifting, broken windows, property damage, and open sex in the family dentist parking lot. How do you explain that to a 5-year-old? Employees are being assaulted. We see unchallenged open drug use and markets. Elected officials have been unwilling to address what everyone agrees is the #1 issue in our county because it is hard. Our citizens and businesses are telling you now that we will not allow Tucson to become California, Oregon, and Washington. We are Tucson. We are asking you to support all of Pima County on our path back to enforcing our laws and feeling safe again. Our goal is to collaborate with you and the city leaders on solutions that will result in enforcing our laws, getting help for those who want it, and holding our elected leaders accountable for making us safer. Chair Bronson, as the result of our outreach, you know that Mayor Romero reached out to you on September 13th, agreeing with our regional approach, contacting you because, as she said, quote, because of the magnitude of these issues, we, the city, cannot do it alone. Then the city council and mayor on October 5th passed unanimously our recommendation for a regional coordinator paid 50% by the city and 50% by the county to be the focal on this issue. A regional approach is essential to capture state, federal, grant dollars to address this critical problem which will be required. We have much work to do. Together. And I don't have to remind you that this problem is bigger than any one of us.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Thank you. Josh Jacobson.
Let's see. Is it okay if I put this here, Chair Bronson?
Yes. Actually, if you want people to see it, Madam Clerk, what should he do?
Actually, if you want to lay it down where that piece tape is, we can put it on the screen.
Oh, lay it down on the flap.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you, Supervisor Christie. Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Josh Jacobson. I'm a local restaurant operator and one of your Pima County Small Business Commissioners. I want to thank Chair Bronson and County Administrator Lesher for starting today's conversation under Addendum Item Number 1. To be clear, my comments today are about people that are living a lawless lifestyle on our streets. On a regular basis, my staff and I are cleaning up drug paraphernalia as pictured here in our properties. We've got people that are coming in using drugs in our bathrooms. Our locations that are closest to bus stops are the most affected. People are getting off the buses, coming into our bathrooms, and oftentimes we've had to pry open bathroom doors to find people knotted off or to force them to leave because they continue to use illegal substances. We are also regularly dealing with vandalism, break-ins, theft of merchandise, as well as our utilities. We have people that will urban camp on our properties at night, and that includes having fires on our patios and defecating on our sidewalks. I spared you the picture of that one. We have spent tens of thousands of dollars in repairs and security upgrades. I call all of this a crime tax, and it's becoming one of our largest expenses. Many times when we have to ask people to leave our premises, they will become very aggressive towards us or even our customers. I personally have been assaulted several times, and so has one of my managers. When customers feel unsafe, it is terrible for business. I have a picture of a weapon here that we confiscated from an individual so that you can see the kind of danger that this threat poses. As an employer, the safety of my employees and customers is my #1 priority, and today it's one of my biggest concerns. We've also heard from other businesses that if things do not change, they will be leaving our city, our region, or closing altogether. And as we go deeper into a recession with a 21% poverty rate in Tucson, this will not be good. We've also received some troubling information from TPD. Pima County clearly doesn't have purview there, but we are down to 275 officers on the street. Help is not going to be able to come. I know that all of you see what's happening in our community and you want a solution as well as our elected officials. Simply put, we need to help those that we can reach, but we also need to disrupt the lawless lifestyle that a relatively small amount of people are living on our streets. We need to end the aggressive panhandling, urban camping, open drug use, and the other illegal activities that follow. Much of this will need to be done through the enforcement of our laws and our judicial system. We recognize that this will be a monumental task and the need for a regional approach to solving this problem. That is why we need Pima County to take a leading role. I thank you all, and we look forward to working with you for a meaningful solution.
Thank you. And you've got your comments typed out?
I do.
If you wouldn't mind giving them to the clerk, we can put them on our website.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Bronson.
All right. Our next speaker is Monica Carlson.
Good morning, Chair Bronson and Supervisors. My name is Monica Carlson. I'm from the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition. And over the past 7 to 8 weeks, I have been out talking to hundreds of businesses and their employees in the city and in the county. When I walk in and tell them why I'm there and what we are doing, the one thing that is common with every single business that I've been in is that they are so thankful. Some of them, which I do not know, most of these businesses will just hug me before I leave. Some of them will look into my eyes grab me by the shoulders and just say a simple thank you. These businesses are desperate. They're desperate for someone, anyone to do something. They're desperate for a change. They are getting angry and upset because they see our elected leaders in their eyes doing nothing about this problem. They are seeing a change, but it's going in the wrong direction. Let's be honest. We are not talking homeless people. We are not talking unsheltered people or whatever, any other label you want to put on it. We are talking drug, crime, and a lawless community that we're living in right now. This is a problem that of our elected leaders not forcing something to be done to get this problem under control. People are sick to death of elected leaders bringing it always back to homelessness. We all know what we are talking about. I've heard a lot of horrific stories in the past 7 weeks, stories that make me feel like I'm living in a movie and not in Tucson. Most of the businesses have used several F words when talking to me about things that they're dealing with on a daily basis. Fear, fire in their parking lots, feces, foil, and fentanyl. A business that I was talking to a few days ago had a man walk out with a can of paint. Someone went after him. He pulled a knife, running at an employee, saying he was going to stab him to death. Another business owner a couple weeks ago that's lived in Tucson his whole life, is 75 years old, sat at his desk with tears in his eyes and said, "What is happening to my Tucson?" This is not a problem that is happening in all big cities. I know this is what a lot of people say, but it is just not true. If you are elected leaders, please lead. What are we doing when this all becomes normal? Our businesses and people are struggling and suffering because of this. This is a problem that can be controlled. Action has to be taken now. Businesses don't call 911 anymore because their comment is, "What's the point?" Why are businesses and people paying taxes in the city and county to not feel safe? Please start doing something.
Thank you. And again, if you'd like us to publish your comments online, give them to the clerk and we will. Is Christine Bowserman available now? Christine Bowserman? All right.
No, I don't want.
Wait, do we have? Is that?
Christine, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry. I'm having technical difficulties and I'm in a public place. Hi, this is Christine Bowserman. I want to thank the supervisors for having me on. I sent an after-action report that I put together. I was the Jim Lehman regional director, and I had 11 people deployed to about 14 locations. One of the concerns I have is most of the items that have been brought up that were problems have come from my 14 people, and I'm wondering what happened in the other locations, that some of these problems were not addressed. But the biggest concern I have right now is that these early voting centers do not have inspectors, marshals, and judges. And as my report states, it's pretty clear in state law that if you're voting, you have to have election marshals and judges. And I think we all know in Pima County, we started as a emergency voting or absentee voting, and it's kind of transgressed to being, we're voting. I mean, I went in and I voted. I was given a ballot and it was put in a sheet. So I don't know why we don't have the statutory required people there. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make at this session. I want to thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Dr. Damon Holt, I think. Good morning.
Good to see you as well. Madam Chair, to fellow Board of Supervisors. Pleasure to be here. I'm come to represent my new organization called the Fresh Start International. We will be hosting a Fresh Start Expo Saturday, October 22nd, this Saturday at the TCC, Tucson Convention Center. Let me explain that so you can know what that entails. It is the ultimate one-stop shop to help people who have been formerly incarcerated. Our mission is where everyone deserves a new beginning. We didn't say second chance, we didn't say third chance, we didn't say fifth chance, because we would be honest, many of us have blown our second chance a long time ago. But we do believe that everyone should get a fresh start. We served the Tucson community last year at the Tucson Convention Center, and we served over 400 people. It is the one-stop shop where I grab the city courts, I grab the justice courts, the superior courts, and juvenile courts to help people get back on their feet after being incarcerated. We were successful on addressing, squashing many warrants. We helped many people who couldn't afford court fees and fines. Some of those fines were waived or significantly reduced so that they can afford it. We were able to help people get their voters' rights. There's 200,000 people in Arizona right now. If you have a felony, you're disenfranchised to even vote. And we help many people be able to get their voters' rights back through the Fresh Start Expo. We also have many different partners at play. We have Laura Conover, our Pima County Attorney's Office, that is a significant partner as far as allowing her prosecutors to help us and defendants do some of this work. We also have Pima County Megan Page, our public defender as well, plus city officials. Mayor Romero is a major partner, and without them we wouldn't be able to do what we do at the Fresh Start event. The reason why I come here is because we did apply for some RICO funds, and we were told that the process would be, part of that process would be that Board Supervisor would review that. So the reason why I'm here is to put a face, so you can know what Fresh Start is about, so you can see a face of what this is about. It's a village. It's about bringing healing to our community. It's about reducing recidivism. It's about getting people the life skills that they need, that when they come out of prison, they're ready to integrate their families, they're ready to take charge of their destiny, and they're ready to get into the driver's seat of their future. And that's what Fresh Start do. We're hosting another one this year, this coming Saturday. I invite every supervisor, if you're not doing anything, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. to come see what this is about. This is powerful, it is amazing, and we're just really, really, really excited. So thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you if you can come.
Okay, thank you. Tara Radcliffe, rather.
Good morning. My name is Tara Radcliffe. I'd like to address elections today. Pima County taxpayers are funding all the special machines, equipment, extra employees, specialized contractors, etc., that the Recorder's Office needs to conduct and process our elections. This is a large financial burden to us. And the integrity and safety of our elections and personal information is becoming a major concern with this new process, not to mention the extended amount of time it will take to count and finalize our votes. What I'd really like to know is why we moved to this gargantuan nightmare of a voting system. For many years, we voted on one day with paper ballots in our local neighborhoods, and votes were tallied and finalized the same day. Now it will take weeks to count votes? This is insanity. Secondly, I am a registered voter and want to be a part of the election process. Today, you will be voting on approval of the submitted poll workers for the upcoming general election, Agenda Item 17. I'd like to bring to your attention the following facts and questions. I submitted an application for poll worker to the Pima County Recorder's Office on October 6th of this year. I received an acknowledgment email from them the same day. I have heard nothing since. I live near 7 voting centers. 5 of these voting centers still list vacancies. However, I noticed a discrepancy with voting center number 118. In the Election Board Worker Appointments document dated today, there are vacancies listed, but in the revised poll worker list document, also listed today, or also dated today, there are no vacancies. This begs me to ask the questions: which information is correct, and how many other discrepancies are there? 3 of the voting centers that I live near, 83, 109, and 118, are listed in the Appointment of Poll Workers Memorandum as having political party distribution challenges. Voting centers 83 and possibly 118 have vacancies that need to be filled. I am a registered libertarian, have applied to be a poll worker, live near these voting centers, and am available to work. Does all of this not qualify me to be someone who can help alleviate the political party distribution challenges the Recorder's Office speaks of? So, if so, why have I been ignored? Is it willfulness or negligence on the part of the Recorder's Office? I respectfully request that you put off voting for the poll worker appointments until all the issues and discrepancies I have listed can be resolved. Thank you.
And again, I invite you, if you would like us to post your remarks, to give them to the clerk.
No, I scribbled too much on them.
Okay. All right, thank you. Laura? That's all I have, Laura, just Laura.
I would like to address the fact that you violated the rights of city employees. Under 21 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 50.23 and 24, it is illegal to make anybody participate in experimental programs using coercion. That is, in fact, how in U.S. law, we actually embrace in U.S. law the Nuremberg Code. So coercion is illegal, and we need to call it coercion. We want to call it the illegal act that it is, and it's important because under 18 U.S. Code Section 2331 and then subsequent 802, inside the definition of domestic terrorism is any time a U.S. citizen or a government in the U.S. is forced to do something that it would not otherwise do. That's also not only coercion, but domestic terrorism. I encourage everyone to take those 2 laws, and when they are met with someone telling them that they are supposed to get the shot, actually ask them and record the person, are you in fact violating 21 Code of Federal Regulations Section 50.23 and 24? Are you interested in doing a civil violation of the law? And if you are you willing to violate 18 U.S. Code 2331, which says that it is illegal to coerce a population and that is a felony, and if the felony has a 99-year prison term with a $100 million fine? I also want to address the fact that the hospitals were set up to fail if they did not abide by the COVID protocols. It was murder for profit or go out of business. It's extortion and premeditated murder. Death certificates were altered to be marked as COVID deaths. It's estimated that between 88.6% and 94% were altered. If a patient did not have insurance and agreed to be diagnosed as a COVID patient, they would be issued Medicare or Medicaid, and they had to agree to the COVID death protocols. Isn't that the epitome of a wolf in sheep's clothing? On March 24, 2020, the CDC and the NVSS changed how death certificates were recorded in violation of federal law, and then 2 days later, HHS okayed Medicare and Medicaid that will ensure that doctors and hospitals get much higher reimbursement if they went along with listing everything as COVID. It was the most lucrative diagnosis you could ever give is COVID, and now if a person is hospitalized, you make even more money if that person dies, and you get to call it COVID death. It's complacency and it's coercion. Patients were given remdesivir, which caused organ failures in roughly 10 days, and were provided no nutrients and placed on ventilators, which were never to exceed 50%, or they would blow out their lungs and return and would have heart attacks. Family members were asked to sign do not resuscitate upon admittance to the hospitals, and they were not permitted to see patients and be advocates for them. It is estimated that between 88.6% and 94% were altered death certificates. Thank you. And these are documentations I would like to give.
Dan Wan. Dan Wan.
Good morning, I'm Dan Wan, and I wasn't going to talk about crime, but since we've had a couple of people talk about it, I will share a real-life experience that I'm having. My daughter works at a store here in Tucson. She is a teenager. She's afraid for her life working in the store because there's constant shoplifting, violence that has been spoken of before. And recently, the store was scoped out, and they figured out where things were. They broke in at night, stole well over $10,000 worth of merchandise, and then left fast enough that no sheriff or police could attend and take care of the situation. I'm afraid for her life. I'm constantly on the phone with her, helping her, making sure, are you way home? She texts me to make sure she's safe and not hurt. And I'm also seriously concerned about her being kidnapped. She's a cute little girl, she's petite, and she could be kidnapped in 5 seconds and she'd be gone. And I know with all the immigration going on, there's a lot of people that want to steal kids. And I'm seriously concerned about that. And I didn't plan on talking about it, but it's for her safety. I've got actually 3 daughters that I'm concerned about. Okay, now the real thing I'm here for, sorry about that, is I've received a letter from a reputable company, very large, that my data was stolen. In fact, I had 2 breaches of my data. This morning, on the news, they announced that the city of Tucson had a breach of their data as well. So my question is, why are we putting our data through 10X and all this voting data out there that it can be breached? Hacking is a way of life. It will happen. No matter what Pima County does, and you've got a great IT team, they will not be able to stop it. It just will happen. It's called measures, countermeasures, countermeasures. Military talks about that. Is you do a measure, someone does a countermeasure, and it's back and forth. The hackers will figure it out. They will get in and steal it. So the data, voter data, is at risk because it's out there. I just want to tell you that. There's a lot of legal stuff going on. The politics will run rampant. Republicans, Democrats, you name it, they'll say, well, it's them, or it's them that caused this, and lawsuits will fly like crazy. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Tim Locks. Tim Locks.
I'll give you a gold star for pronouncing my name properly.
I get very few gold stars, so thank you, sir.
There you go. Well, so my name is Tim Locks. 3 weeks ago, I submitted a request to the Pima County Elections Department to review the Delta file transfer logs from the August 2 primary election. I'm interested in how long it takes from the time a voter checks in to the time that the last e-poll book is updated in Pima County. What have I gotten? Crickets, nothing. So I know I'm right over the target. These Delta files are the real problem. I wonder why Elections has not yet honored my request when doing so would take so little effort. Either these files don't exist or they don't want to share the information because the information is very damning. Maybe this is why taxpayers must once again find money to pay for a project manager whose sole purpose is to monitor the Delta file transfers. We are paying for a service to a company that only has 40 employees, thereabouts, and they are going to avail themselves to probably not only Pima County, nationwide to whatever other customers they may have. What's the purpose? So they can push Delta files manually because on their own they don't get up to the cloud and propagated properly. This implies that we have yet another invasion of our election system that has been granted by the very people who are mandated to protect it. The Tenex system is not, and I repeat, is not properly certified in the state of Arizona and should not be used in the general election. I will state once again that the only solution to free and fair elections is precinct voting and hand counting ballots. Machines and vendors have no room here. My second item. If you give a white supremacist a microphone, he's going to tell you about the boatloads of people committing voter fraud. Those are the words of our county recorder. She should be censored. The people of Pima County no longer have faith in her ability to discharge her duties as a county recorder in a nonpartisan manner, and she should resign immediately. Her comments were very racist. They went on. There were more, and there was another tweet that she put out a few days in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith Von Hannigan. Keith? I thought I saw you. Oh, there you are.
Your device is ready to pair.
Good morning, all. My name is Keith Van Heinigen. I've been a resident in Pima County for almost 25 years now. That's a quarter dang century. What's going on with that? So I'm happy that Dr. DiFilippo and Christopher D. Spohn are going off and ripping this majority to shreds with information that the media, who is absent from the room, will never report, because that's how cover-ups are done around here. Now, Mr. Matt Hines, the good doctor who went headlong into the era of Faucism, has convinced you all that we need to follow the CDC into hell. Well, guess what? Been there, done that, not gonna do it again, not gonna let you do it to me or my neighbors. Catalina, I understand your position. You're failing upwards, just like your father did. I mean, TUSD is a tower of great knowledge, is it not? With some of the lowest scores in the country. Oh, and then there's Rex Scott, a former principal. That explains quite a bit. And Sharon, after your admonition against free speech, righteous indignation, rage, and low profanity that exists in society, you are rejecting the truth of that reality. A homeless camp, you're gonna build a homeless camp for what? We have 5,000 to 10,000 homeless people in this town, and most of them, are drug-addled criminals. That'd be a minimum security prison. The cost would be huge. And about that taxpayer-funded county board of supervisors, whatever conclave you did here at the Dome, so Chuck Huckleberry could have a good farewell. Well, that was disgusting and a waste of tax dollars. And as Iron Bar would say, listen to the law.
Thank you. Gisela Aaron.
Good morning. My name is Gisela Aaron. I live in Rita Ranch. And I concur with all the speakers that 10X software is not credentialed as they tout on their brochure that they gave out, elections gave out. In fact, they have 10X went through and touts to be accredited per NTS Huntsville and testing lab SLI. Last week we heard SLI was not accredited and the diploma or their certificate had been changed to 3 years instead of 2 years as allowed by the law. I have a letter here, I don't know if you can see it, and I sent it, I submitted it, that NTS Huntsville, who supposedly accredited 10X software, is in fact, they took away their accreditation voluntarily in March 13, 2017. I also have the standards for the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, and our requirement by the state, the third category requires testing labs in Arizona to be federally accredited, and that's not the truth. So let me show you. And I submitted this to you. This is category 3, the only category we went by. We did not choose the other 3 categories. This is the only requirement that we codified into law. So I also warned you in February 27th, I sent you all a statement saying that 10X Software Solutions is also on the, there's also a Russian company, and I was worried about it because we hear so many disturbing stories about Russia hacking, breaching airports, banks, and government systems. Well, ABC News reported 10X Software Solution was possibly breached, but they did not deny it nor confirm it. I also told you on the 27th of February that 10X Software has problems with their website. When I first researched them, I got a warning on my computer not to go past it because my information could be stolen if I were to click on it. I told you that. There's also the matter that the election department wants to rent 80 e-poll books. Well, will they go through accuracy and logic testing? And will there be a public event about this? And will those, and we still have the problem of the lab not being accredited, who supposedly is accrediting 10X. So I'm not sure that our data is safe. I'm worried about that, and we heard that many...
And I thank you. Your time has expired.
I have reports, hundreds of reports of hacking, and I sent them to you before, and I got no comment.
And again, your time has expired. Thank you. Drew Heaton.
Drew is not here. Can I have her time?
No.
I'll take her time.
Oh, no, you're next, so.
But I'll take her time.
No.
2 years of talking to educate you guys. I feel like we all showed up to class to do a big project report. However, you that sit behind this plexiglass have not done your homework, and I have, but you get the grade. I want you to also look into the Safety Act, those that are very concerned about homeless or people breaking into their establishment, because the Safety Act not only protects our constituents, that's you, to the left who couldn't even show up and be here, or Adelita who had to go in the back during call to the public to get some candy, who sits on the health board. No, not needed, is it? Shake your head. I don't care. I'm free to whatever the heck I want to say. So if the Safety Act does get enacted here, you guys might be in trouble, and it's not going to be from me because I use my brains. I come in here and I educate you guys, and you guys, are you guys getting paid for this position? This is disappointing. I want to say that I back everything that Steve Christie is saying about these machines. We've got Secretary of State running for governor, and isn't it her in Arizona statute 16442 who certifies the tabulating equipment? I think that's a conflict of interest. Not any more or any less of a conflict of interest of Adelita sitting on the TUSD board or the health board. And here, I think maybe Adelita might be too busy. She can't do her homework. She can't even sit during call to the public. Which brings me to the past board meetings where Adelita stated that Christie's characterization of the vaccine is incorrect. But why did Denmark announce that the age of 16 below are advised not to take the jab, while Florida states don't touch it if you're under 39? The EMA advises against the use of COVID-19 with J&J for those that have a history of capillary leak syndrome, not to mention the black box warning for clotting. If those that are the healthiest are advised to avoid the injection due to increased cardiac disease or another serious side effect, how are those going to do that are frail? Or we can just blame their new side effect or their disease on their previous ailments. The board has never addressed the consequences of these mandates or the vaccines. Critical thinking has been lost as California doctors are being silenced, and their patient-to-doctor relationship has been stolen by big pharma government. But the good news is there are 80 anti-vaccine bills that have been introduced in our state legislators. Because those who know, and we aren't shutting up. As one of the biggest scientific studies ever to take place in America continues, it has never been more important to contact your senators to save our body sovereignty. As the CDC discusses adding a jab to the required immunization schedule for school-aged children who are not at risk. Do you hear me, Matt Hines, who couldn't show up? Those burned by the vaccine pray that your loved ones are never hurt like ours are. For the drug that comes with a warning that doesn't stop transmission, it doesn't give immunity, it comes with side effects and broken promises. Silencing opposition voices is one way to control the public, and you often cut my mic like the last time I was here, Sharon. Shame on you. Wasted tax dollars.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Ann Rose.
And you're not doing for OSHA wiping that down right. So study.
I'm giving you a warning. Please do not screen out. Thank you.
Good morning. 2 weeks ago, at the end of the Board of Supervisors meeting, Ms. Grijalva replaced Dr. Hines as liaison to the Board of Health. One individual holds 3 positions within the county, one person with a certain point of view. There's a lack of diversity and a bit of power mongering, but that's acceptable, it seems. Pima County takes blood money from the corrupted CDC and FDA for COVID management. It goes for tracking and surveillance and more experimental shots, but not to help businesses that suffered under the policies set by the majority of this board, of course with the advice from the Board of Health. Nor does this money help anyone affected by job loss via mandates or health devastated because of injuries from the shots. Corruption. I'm reminded of the RTA special election in May 2006. Around that time, Arizona was considered the most corrupt state in the nation. Also at that time, Pima County had the highest paid county administrator in the country. Involved were Appellate Court Judge Kent Catani, AG Terry Goddard, Pima County employee John Moffitt, and Elections Director Brad Nelson. It's too long of a story for now, but the documentary, Fatally Flawed, chronicles it. Some of the details are critical, though, as we hold another election in 3 weeks. Back on election night in May 2006, poll observers noticed an opened instruction manual that is banned from use in an official election. The quick-thinking observers captured telephoto images that not only identified the contraband manual, but revealed the book open to the area, demonstrating a key task for altering electronic database files. That night, election observers asked Brad Nelson to make a backup CD to hand to the police until their observed violations were investigated. Brad Nelson refused. By 10 p.m., he told the observers that work was done for the night and there was nothing left to observe. At 10:13 p.m., Pima elections started up again and continued to tabulate votes until 3 a.m. Over 1 month ago, Ms. Hargrove stated there was no way any change could be made to how the general election was run. After all the information presented here since the August primary election, why wouldn't she consider changes to systemic problems that threaten the integrity of an election? If her inability to reconsider a plan carried over into a military operation that required critical thinking and change on the battlefield for survival, her troops probably would not make it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes call to the public. We'll now move on to our regular, we have no executive session item, so we'll move on to Board of Supervisors sitting as other boards, Flood Control District Board. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the item.
I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. We now move on to Board of Supervisors sitting as the board, approval of the consent calendar. Does anybody wish to pull an item?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
I would like to pull items 2, 3, 6, 13, and 17 for separate consideration.
13 and 17?
2, 3, 6, 13, and 17.
All right.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
I'll go ahead and move the rest of the consent agenda.
In its entirety.
Except for those items.
Except for those items. I'll second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to item number 2. It's a procurement. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is dealing with the Pima Animal Care Facility, having a veterinary consultant or a secondary veterinary supply system to provide spay and neuter services. And this contract with this firm is going to be coming from the general fund for $946,000. My question is, we have all kinds of certain funds in PAC, certain silos of money, of revenue. Doesn't PAC have its own numerous funding sources, and why is this coming out of the general fund?
Dr. Garcia or Ms. Lesher?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, all the budget that is assigned to PAC is a combination of general fund as well as grant and supplemental funds. In this case, this program historically was funded through outside grants, but for the last 3 years has been funded with general fund resources.
Madam Chair, Dr. Garcia, so there's no way that the PAC can fund itself through its own financial resources, and is this the first time it's come on this particular item to come before the board for financing?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, no, it is not. It has, like I said, has been part of the general fund portion of the PAC budget for the last 3 years.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 3-1, Supervisor Christie on the negative side, the motion carries. Moving on to item 3, Durazo Construction. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a contract in the amount of $2 million from various county funds to numerous procurement authorized construction companies, which these construction companies are just fine, but the amendment to provide this job order master agreement states specifically that it is for park development services. If you look in the memo, the job order contract is a master agreement for park development services, and the description is, although we are still in the first year of the contract, there are two unanticipated larger projects that are moving forward in the JOC under this agreement. This includes the Robles Ranch Thrift Store and Food Bank, and a flood control district project to provide landscaping and stormwater harvesting at the Overton and La Cañada properties. These don't comply or seem to be consistent with what the award is being designated for, which is for park development services. I don't think the money for a thrift store or the money for a wastewater reclamation area is park services. Is there someone I could?
Chair Bronson, Deputy County Administrator DeBonis can answer that easily. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, so the master agreement is available for use by multiple departments, primarily Natural Resources, Parks and Recreation. In the case of the Robles Ranch Thrift Store and Food Bank, that is located at a Pima County Community Center, which is designated as a park. So they have an existing operation there. They're in an aged building. The determination was made to replace that with a new modular structure, and therefore that is being constructed under this job order contract. So the project was anticipated and the monies were budgeted for. We did not originally anticipate using the job order contract master agreement. The reason for using that is the difficulty that we're experiencing getting qualified bidders on a number of our projects. So the material pricing escalation issues and labor escalation issues have reduced the number of competitive bids we're using. So we've worked with the procurement department and we've come to the approach of using this job order contract master agreement for that project. The flood control improvements, typically if you take the loop for example, we have improvements that are multi-use and they are designated as park facilities even though they are projects being constructed by the Regional Flood Control District. So it's not uncommon for us to have water harvesting basins and other improvements that are flood control related that then can be used for passive recreation reasons. So that's why those two projects are specifically referenced.
Madam Chair, Mr. DeBonis, it just seems like we're kind of massaging titles and massaging certain elements of investment under different names so they comply and that they could qualify, basically, is what's happening.
Supervisor Christie, I appreciate that perspective. It's fairly common, though, for us to have multiple uses coexisting within areas of project development. So I would just, the loop is a perfect example of that, where we have flood control improvements along the major water courses that also have amenities that are used for community recreational purposes. So it's, in my opinion, not a massaging or reaching, that there is an actual nexus between those items, and that's why that's referenced in this item.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Okay, this is for approval of consent item 3.
Correct.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to item 6, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
This is our friends, the Jot Properties, that we are going to pay an additional $3 million to support asylum seekers and shelter them. Right now, it appears that we're well over $10 million cumulatively to Jot Properties, who, by the way, are not a Tucson area or Pima County area corporation. They're up somewhere in Highland Park, California. It's probably neither here nor there, but it makes it, I think, even worse that this is an out-of-town corporation that's receiving this kind of money. So far, the latest information I've been given that from the reporting period of October 6th through the 12th, there have been 1,780 legally processed asylum seeker releases. And the total from that date of, the beginning date of April 22nd is a total of 68,794 asylum seekers being processed. And that doesn't include the other properties that the city owns, and it does not include, of course, the transportation of the asylum seekers throughout their quote-unquote next stops in the asylum seeker process. I have a feeling that the community has no idea how many people are being processed on this level, and that how many people are passing through Pima County, and how many people are being sheltered at public expense in motels and hotels, not just supported by Pima County, but by the city of Tucson. And as they work their way through in this process of asylum seeking, we are seeing exorbitant amounts of taxpayer money coming through this system, to the point for this project alone, it's over $10 million to date to shelter, clothe, feed, medicate asylum seekers, and to transport them to whatever appointments they have to get their asylum seeker status and beyond to their final destination. Unfortunately, this kind of thing is not broadcast through the community, but it's going to be my intention to make sure that whenever these types of allocations of public funds come up, that we know what they are for and how many people are involved. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Okay, approval of consent item 6. Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 3-1, motion carries. Moving on to item 13, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
It's basically for the knowledge of the community. We've had discussions at this very board that one or more of my colleagues has supported the idea of taking additional monies from the general fund, the county's checking account, and channeling it to the Pima County Health Department. Some have said in the tune of an additional $5 million to enhance the activities of the Pima County Health Department through the general fund. I've spoken against that, and at this particular time, it's still an item that's out there for consideration by this board. I heartily voice my opinion against it, and it's important to note in this particular agenda item that it states that this is from the Arizona Department of Health Services to provide for Senate Bill 1847. Senate Bill 1847 is the accumulated tax on medical marijuana. $724,000 of this accumulated pot tax is going to the Pima County Health Department coffers. So when we talk about additional funding needs out of the general fund for the Pima County Health Department, we need only to investigate where other funding sources are if this is indeed what is the desire of this board. We don't need to take any money out of the taxpayers' general fund. There are numerous other silos of funding that if the health department wishes to appeal for them or apply for them, they can do so without affecting the general fund. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Okay, approval of consent calendar item 13. Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 3-1, motion carries. Moving on to item 17, acceptance public defense services. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Let me get to item 17. The Department of Justice is providing the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention to provide for the Pima County Victim Restitution Assistance Program. $400,000 in a 3-year term of the contract. If you go into the background on this, it's quite telling. The purpose of this restitution assistance project is to pilot a victim restitution assistance program for juvenile defendants on Pima County's juvenile court. And these are designed for those juvenile defendants who are unable to pay court-ordered victim restitution. The inability to pay restitution is a significant barrier and inhibits juvenile clients' ability to resolve personal and environmental factors that increase the risk of recidivism. We heard today from community leaders about crime issues and other various related problems with crime. Here is a perfect example. In this particular system, they're stating that court-ordered restitution perpetrators, those who have perpetrated and have been ordered to pay restitution, will be removed from that requirement of restitution, and the taxpayers will pay for it. So if you are a victim of crime and you have suffered a loss, you will use your taxpayers' money to pay yourself for a crime perpetrated by someone else. This program benefits the public, it says here, by allowing victims to receive the restitution, their own money, ordered by the court. It would help juveniles and their families by resolving a financial burden that causes them to linger in the justice system. If they paid the restitution, maybe they would think twice about being a recidivist. It goes on to describe that no research on this is available, and that this is the scientific element, there is a strong anecdotal consensus that the heavy burden of unpaid victim restitution hangs on clients for years and hamstrings their ability to engage in positive. Where is personal responsibility? Where is the restitution that they're supposed to be paying for because they caused the damage? But yet we have taxpayer money going to pay taxpayers their own money for crimes they did not commit and damage that has been perpetrated against them. At present, and this is the clincher, at present there are no evidence-based practices to select to implement. So they don't even know if this is going to work. They have no proof. They have no history of this. It's anecdotal, and we're not able to provide any evidence that this is a good idea, but yet we want taxpayers to fork over $400,000 to pay victims of crime their own money. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Christie. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Okay, approval of consent item number 17. Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 3-1, motion carries. It's 10:20 now. We're going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll return at the sound of the gavel.
That completes the consent agenda, correct?
Yep, it completes the
We go on to-
consent.
Back to the regular agenda.
Right. Good morning. We're back in regular session. We're moving on to item 8 on the regular agenda, which is County Administrator's Update. Ms. Lesher.
Thank you, Chair Bronson. I just have 2 quick items. One, remind people there's a job fair that we are conducting in cooperation with the City of Tucson. It will be at Tucson Convention Center on Thursday from 10 to 4. We've got a lot of county departments who will be there reaching out to talk with people who are interested perhaps in a job in public service, so we hope people will come. And just a quick shout out to Lonnie Anderson. As many of you know, Lonnie's our Director of Community Health Food Service and was just named the Public Health Leadership Award of the Year for 2022 by the Arizona Public Health Association. So our thanks to Lonnie and congratulations to her. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 9. This is unfinished business from 8/15/22. Housing affordability, and these are revised recommendations for our consideration. What's the pleasure of the board?
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grijalva.
If you look at the county administrator's memo, there's a page on bylaws. I think it's on page, let me try to remember here. I think there's just a piece on 2.0, and it's D as in David. I just was wondering if we could add workforce to that, because we have market rate, affordability, and bridged from homelessness as far as continuum of housing.
Ms. Lesher.
To be clear, I'm sorry, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, is that 2.02 the purpose of the commission to,
yes.
I'm sorry, and to modify
yes, and
item
it's 2D, continuum of housing.
Got it.
And you have market rate, affordable, and bridge to homelessness. And if we could add like workforce, because I think that makes sense. We're going to have to start looking at some alternatives for development and developers. And so if we're trying to create opportunities for housing at market rate, may be something that we have to explore within the county.
Okay. Staff has no objection if approved by the board.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
I just have one little bit of a piece of contention. This commission has been renamed a regional commission, and by looking at its makeup, it's clear that it's a Pima County regional commission. Pima County is putting it forward. Pima County is commissioning it. Pima County is approving it and coordinating it and is taking the lead on it. And I think it's important that people know that the region is Pima County, and perhaps if this was sent over to the Pima Association of Governments, that'd be one thing. But Pima County is taking the lead on this, and consequently, my predilection is that it should be the Pima County Housing Authority and not a regional one. That's my point of view, and I'm not going to split hairs over it, but I think it's important that the community knows that Pima County is taking the lead on this.
Would you, Supervisor Christie, what if we did Pima County Regional Affordable Housing Commission?
Well, that's a mouthful, but it seems to cover all areas, and that'd be fine.
Ms. Lesher, would you have any objection?
Staff has no objection. Thank you, ma'am.
But first, before it's approved by staff, you have to repeat it 3 times.
Okay, then. We're having fun, aren't we? If there are any other changes, any discussion beyond this?
Can we, Chair Bronson, so the recommendation is to have 3 appointments from the City of Tucson, 1 from each City of South Tucson, Town of Marana, Oro Valley, Sahuarita, for a total of 18 members, and then 10 members, 2 appointed by each member of the board, 1 member appointed by the county administrator, and 7 members. The other 7 members are the 3 City of Tucson, 1 by each, right? Okay. So it's a total of 18.
Supervisor, I'm sorry, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other points of clarification, discussion? All right, the item has it been moved and seconded?
Chair Bronson,
I'll move
no.
the item.
Okay, you'll move it?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion and a second with the changes we've outlined?
Sure.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, roll call.
Okay, and for clarification, this is to approve the revised recommendations listed on the County Administrator's memo of October 11th with the revisions today.
Correct.
Okay. Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to Clerk of the Board, items 10, which is Flowing Wells Irrigation District Annual Election Cancellation, and item 11, which is petition for relief of taxes. If nobody wishes to divide the question, I'll move those items.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Roll call.
This is for approval of items 10 and 11.
Correct.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to County Attorney, item 12, Anti-Racketeering Revolving Fund. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the item, Madam Chair.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second by Supervisor Grijalva. Any
Chair-
discussion?
Chair Bronson, the only thing I'd like to see is that this process to apply for these funds are transparent. You know, you have like a little button that says this is what you can do, or how do we, what are the qualifications or criteria to access these funds? Legally, we have some requirements, but I'd like to see that. I was looking up Maricopa, and they have a little button that says apply for anti-racketeering revolving or funds. I'd like to see Pima County make that a little clearer.
And this is coming from the county attorney, who's an independent elected official. I think if there's the motion and a second, we might also do a caveat to ask the county attorney to maybe parallel what Maricopa is doing in
Well,
this
and
regard.
I did send her an email directly requesting that. I think when these items come up, if we know that there's been a really transparent process on how to access the funds, it would make it a lot easier to
I
vote for.
concur. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Okay, this is for approval of item number 12, and just for clarification, is it going to include the caveat?
No, I sent her an email. I don't know that it's necessary as a requirement.
So this is for approval.
Right.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to Development Services, items 13, 14, 15, and 16, final plat with assurances, final plat with assurances, block plat without assurances, and final plat with assurances. If nobody wishes to divide the question, I'll move those items.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Roll call.
Okay, this is for approval of agenda items 13 through 16. Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to item 17, election boards, pursuant to ARS 16-531A, appointment of election board workers and tally boards recruited and on file in the Elections Department for the November 8th, 2022 general election. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
under this particular item, I was going to ask that it be continued to November 1st because there are numerous voting centers that are not politically balanced or completely filled, quite a number of them, a large number of them, and I was hoping that by continuing it, the elections director would have more time to fill those vacancies just prior to the actual election day. However, upon looking into the regulations on this particular item, it has to be approved 21 days before the actual election day, so it's apparent that it has to be approved today. However, we will have ample opportunity in the rest of the board meeting to discuss the politically balanced or unbalanced voting centers. So I would move that we approve the appointment of the election board workers and tally boards recruited and on file in the elections department.
I'll second that motion. Any further discussion?
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grover.
There are several of the vote centers that are in outlying areas in Pima County. We have some difficulty in cells getting people there, and I'm wondering if we're offering mileage or time, paid time in order to get out to those locations?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grahova, yes, we do pay mileage for that.
And are we paying any hourly rate for the drive out there?
We do not pay hourly rate. Any changes to rates has to be approved by the Board of Supervisors.
I would be willing to consider that, because I do think that if we're compensating people for their time to get out there, in addition to the rate that is given to every other poll worker for the different jobs, it might make it a little more attractive to get out there.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
Respect and consideration to you and my fellow board members, since we are on the subject of polls and elections and workers, could we also consider at this time, since we've already discussed some of it, addendum item 3?
Let's move this item, and then we can, we can go to 3 after that.
After we approve the tally? I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. We have a motion on the floor to approve. Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-0, motion carries. I'm going to briefly move on before we go into hearings and item 3 on the addendum. Move to item 18, Office of Emergency Management, and resolution number 2022-64. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor.
I have a question on this particular item. I was prepared to go on to addendum 3, so bear with me while I get to, this is item 16. It's a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. My question on this particular one is, if it's a jurisdictional plan, why is it that we are missing 2 jurisdictions? City of South Tucson is not on it, and neither are the nations, but all the other ones are. If this is multi-jurisdictional, why are those 2 not signed on?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, the Pasquayaki Nation has signed on. The Tohono O'odham Nation has not. They have their own plan and opted to move forward with their individual plan and not be part of this, but Pasquayaki is as well. I do not know about South Tucson. If we have other information. They have their own plan, I'm told again, which is they have chosen to simply have their own plans and not be part of the multi-jurisdictional plan.
Is that right? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, motion on the floor. Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. And Supervisor Christie, I am going to move quickly to hearings since there's just the one franchise license and permit. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us in opposition to this item at this time? If not, I move to close public hearing and approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes?
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Brunson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Actually, item 20 has been continued until November 1st. So that brings us to the end of the regular agenda. We now move on to the addendum agenda. And we want to move to Supervisor Christie's request. We move on to item 3, 2002 General Election Board. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry that the recorder was unable to be here today. I had a number of questions directed to her. Is there a representative from the recorder's office?
No.
Well, for the sake of discussion, let me just relay to the board and to the public what questions I would have asked the recorder had she been here. First one would be...
Madam Chair, can I request that he submit these to the record and so we can move on?
I'm sorry, you're out of order, Supervisor. Supervisor Christie had the floor.
So the first question I would ask the recorder had she been here is, number one, do you staff the early and emergency voting sites in the same manner as the Elections Department staffs its voting centers? And if so, what are the differences? I wouldn't ask Director Hargrove to speak for the recorder, but I think it would be illuminating to know if there are any differences in the manner of how they staff. The second question I would ask her, is your previously stated policy of not allowing political observers trained and certified by their own political party still in effect? Even though they are allowed in Maricopa and Cochise County, I'm wondering if that policy which she has stated of not allowing political observers still in effect. And the third question I would ask the recorder had she been here, the elections manual that is generated by the Secretary of State, from which the recorder's office, which has been stated by the recorder, uses to comply with state law, was last updated, we believe, in 2019. Is the 2019 Secretary of State's elections manual current with all elections laws that have been enacted since that time? Is there a way that these could be directed to the recorder for her response at another time through the clerk of the board?
Certainly.
All right, I'll hand them to the clerk. So then at this particular point, I have questions for Madam Director, who I have to say I appreciate. You are always available. You always attend the meetings. You always answer the questions. Maybe not to the way I would like you to answer them, but you do answer them and you make yourself available. And I think that's commendable, and I appreciate it very much. Having said that, we have previously discussed the legal requirements for the Board of Supervisors to approve equally politically balanced election boards. Can you, at this point, as we approach the deadlines, can you please describe for us the composition of an election board and their members' respective duties? What makes up an election board?
Well, there's the statutory requirement of the election board, one inspector, one marshal, 2 judges, and as many clerks as we deem necessary. And the inspector of the election board is the supervisor who oversees the entire process. The marshal is really the, I would call them the sheriff or the police of the vote center, where they make sure that order is maintained inside the vote center and outside the vote center within the 75-foot limit. The judges of the vote center really oversee the process. So as we talk about the statutory requirements, if I may explain, the makeup of Pima County's boards are a little different. We have more than 2 judges. And we have more than 2 judges because I had a conversation with an inspector and staff upon arriving here as we discussed vote centers and changing from precincts. I added additional judges because we have more poll books. So basically, we have more than one register of voters in each vote center, whereas typically in a precinct, there was only the one list. And the judge of the same party of the inspector primarily oversaw the signature roster, and the judge of the opposite party of the inspector oversaw distributing ballots.
And they all must be politically balanced.
They should be, yes, politically balanced.
So the old style, or the former model, was we had an inspector, a judge of the same party, a judge of the opposite party, and clerks.
And a marshal.
I'm sorry, a marshal and the clerks. The judges, 2 of them, and the inspector and the marshal all must be politically balanced. Clerks do not have to be politically balanced, and you can expand the number of clerks based on the assumed volume of the particular voting center.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And so what I did indeed put more pressure on myself and my staff in finding equal number of judges to man the vote centers, because in any vote center now, we have a minimum of 4 judges. I believe it makes the process more transparent. I believe it provides more oversight, because it is very difficult for 2 judges, in my opinion, to oversee a vote center that has 3 to 4 registers going and issuing several ballots at one time. I hope it is the desire of the board to maintain what I put in place, even though it is more difficult to staff. But we do meet, for most of the vote centers, the statutory requirement of having only the 2 judges. It is just the addition of judges that really is creating the disparity among the vote centers.
Well, you've touched on the new composition.
Yes.
And just to reiterate, how are those boards constructed to be politically balanced? What's the actual nuts and bolts of the political balance of the new style?
Each judge actually represents the opposite party, so they sit together at the tables with the poll book, and they represent the opposite parties. Of course, the inspector would be of the opposite party of one of the judges. The marshal is of the opposite party of the inspector.
Okay. Recently, you conveyed your intent to identify all poll workers their political party affiliation by color-coding their name lanyards or tags. Why?
Supervisor Christie, that was brought up in EIC meeting from one of the commissioners, the concern that they could not identify the party representation of the board workers. It is not a requirement, it is not a statutory requirement, and we do not have to do it if that is the will of the board. However, the recorder's office does identify their board workers with colored lanyards in the early voting locations to indicate their party designation.
Well, here's my concern on that. It's important, of course, obviously it's required, that we know the political affiliation of the poll workers and that they are attracted into the whole system in a politically balanced way. But other than that, when the voting begins and when the voters come to vote, all political affiliations end as far as broadcasting them. And the recorder herself has listed in her after-action report numerous instances of abuse by either voters or fellow workers or folks coming in and making things difficult for people trying to vote. This is, as I'm not telling you anything you don't already know or anything anybody doesn't already know, this is a highly politically charged atmosphere, and the opportunity for a voter to see what a poll worker's political affiliation, I think, is jeopardizing the security of not only the poll worker, but the system. It should be private, and it should be kept under wraps and not divulged what the political party of the poll worker is for those reasons. Let's use an example, and I'm being facetious in a tongue-in-cheek manner, but it might drive home my point. What if you had a Republican extremist MAGA individual who comes to vote and is raring to go, and he gets in line and he sees as he approaches the ballot issuing area that he's being handled by a Democrat. I think, and I'm being facetious again, but the point is there's an opportunity for someone to have grave doubts at least, and maybe even a certain reaction at worst, when that individual goes to vote and sees that he's being handed a ballot by the opposite party. I think it's a dangerous situation to have that broadcasted and divulged and revealed that the poll workers are of a political affiliation. They shouldn't be notifying people of their political affiliation in the poll setting. My suggestion would be that a certification statement made by you, Madam Director, that you certify that this polling site, this vote center, is fully balanced politically, and that you certify that it is, and that you can post it with all the other postings in the vote centers throughout the county that will assure that you as the director know and have analyzed and have looked into the fact that the workers are all politically balanced, and you certify it, and that's it.
Supervisor Christie, I do not disagree with you, and I am not married to advertising what the poll workers' affiliation is. And my main concern is for the poll workers. So if it is going to endanger them in any way, then I absolutely do not want to do that.
I put them in that position.
Absolutely. So, I am fine with them just having their name tags like they normally have, and if
a statement of certification on your part.
Sure, yes, sir. I can do that.
Okay. Well, very good. And my final question, and I was going to read some constituents' mail, is kind of leaked out about the political affiliation being identified with the poll workers, and the mail that I have gotten on it is they are adamantly against it and scared that it could result in some kind of a confrontation or altercation that really doesn't need to be made if their affiliation is not known. So I don't need to go into that, since you've agreed with removing the political affiliation and making the certified statement to the public.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, if I may, this was a request that came from the EIC to the elections director. We're happy to communicate back to the EIC the discussion that's occurred and why we were going to do it a little bit differently than as stated today.
That'll save me the job of doing it, so thank you. And finally, my last question is, we've heard it again, could you please address the accreditation issues of 10X?
Yes, sir, Supervisor Christie. The state does not certify electronic poll books, nor does the federal government require certification of electronic poll books. So as far as I am aware, there are voluntary standards that they can adhere to, but there is no criteria or mandate for them to be certified.
Okay, and I made a mistake. I do have one more issue. There have been a number of discussions we've had where you have pointed out the problems of having poll workers, particularly Republican poll workers, on the nations at the voting sites there. I'm not sure if there's a veiled message as to why that is happening or that it's being pointed out repeatedly, but I think it's important to note that in addition to the voting centers on the nations, we also are are lacking poll workers and the political balance in Avra Valley, in Catalina, at the Clemens Center, at Donna Liggins Community Center, at the Tucson Convention Center, the Mount Lemmon Community Center, various faith-based centers, the Tucson Expo Center, the Tucson Fraternal Order of Police, 4 Vale Schools, Westward Look, and the Miller Golf Links Library. These are all, according to the last tally that we were given, are lacking adequate poll workers and are suffering from the political imbalance, not just those on the nation. Can you address any kind of progress that's been made since that information was provided to our office?
Yes, Supervisor Christie. Actually, the numbers change daily, and a lot of those vote centers where we needed Republican workers have been filled. We are continuously working every day and still getting poll workers that are willing to go out to the outlying areas and do what they can to get there. I can provide you an updated list as that I know yesterday when I was conducting training that we did assign several poll workers to different locations, and those locations are whole. So there are no Republicans or Democrats missing from any of those locations. And I will make one other statement. I think Christina Bauserman submitted a letter indicating that she wanted an inspector and 2 judges at all vote centers, which we cannot do if the vote center is as large as some of the vote centers are that we have. However, that is an option for vote centers that we know only have 14 voters or 17 voters or less than 100 voters that may show up. So that will, when I give you the update, I will also give you that recommendation to decrease the number of poll workers in those locations, and then those locations can easily be filled, I hope, by doing that.
Great, I'll be looking forward to those updates. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Chair
Thank
Bronson?
you. Supervisor.
Will someone from your office have a table, maybe at the job fair?
No, we will not have a table at the job fair. Unfortunately, we just don't even have the staff to be able to do that.
Maybe just like at one of the other departments, have like a flyer or something there in case someone's interested. And I really would like to see us consider a stipend for travel time and mileage for some of the other outlying areas, or if you have a need from someone who is on the far side of town, but is willing to go out there, I think it might make it a little bit easier, because gas is really expensive.
Yes, Supervisor Grahova and Supervisor Christie, I failed to mention that we are putting together a list of specific locations that we're going to publish, so individuals know where we need workers.
So the last memo had Pima County currently meets the statutory requirement of political distribution in all but 15 vote centers. Has that number been updated? Less, or is that still the same?
Actually, the number fluctuates, and so we meet and then we do not meet the statutory requirements depending on whether or not these poll workers leave or sign up.
So I'm assuming, Supervisor Christie, some of the locations that you were listing have the vote centers that were in that memo? Like there's 26 vote centers that have political party distribution challenges. I'm assuming that some of those that you were listing are there? Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I have just a question. I'm looking at the DS-850 digital scanner and looking at the electionware, the 6.0, 0.4, and firmware 2400. When I tried to locate these versions on the tabulating equipment used, I found that the 2400 version was certified on 6/17/2013. And then, and again, I don't need an answer now, but again, there's been questions about whether we have machines that are properly certified. And then I want to draw your attention to Arizona Revised Statute 16442, Section B, which I think our elections director cited, made no reference to Section F, which I think is an override. Section B says machines or devices used at any election for federal, state, or county offices may only be certified for use in this state, meaning Arizona, and may only be used in this state if they comply with the Help America Vote Act of 2002, and if those machines or devices have been tested and approved by a laboratory that is accredited pursuant to the Help America Vote Act of 2002. Section F goes on to say, and again, I think Section F overrides Section B, and Section F goes to state, the Secretary of State or the governing body may provide for the experimental use of a voting system or device without a final adoption of the voting system or device, and its use at the election is valid as if the machine had been permanently adopted. So I'm just trying to navigate this, and again, we have questions about whether our machines are properly certified. And I don't need you to address it now, but if our county attorney has any thoughts on this, it would be helpful. And that's all. Again, just speculating and wondering what that says about our election process.
Madam Chair, very quickly, is it true, Madam Director, that judges are paid more than clerks?
No, that is not true.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I don't think this requires action. So let's move on then back to the addendum, item 1, which is street living homeless temporary shelters. I've asked the county administrator for an update. Mr. Daly, I think, made reference to in his remarks, made reference to the city of Tucson and Mayor Romero having committed to a regional coordinator, half paid for by the city and half by the county. Ms. Lesher, what are your thoughts? And I did speak with the mayor yesterday. I don't think we had a meeting of minds as to what we're going to do, or what the prescribed remedy is. So it's going to be an ongoing discussion, but your thoughts on particularly on the committee.
And Chair Bronson, regarding the specifics of the individual that would be that been suggested to be a joint position by the city and the county, I have been talking with the city manager and looking at ensuring that we have, by reallocation of an existing position within the county, to be able to fund and staff that half the position. I've been working closely with Mr. Ortega about the development of that job description, how that individual can report to both of us. I think that what we're hearing from the community and from the groups that are working on this issue, that one of the challenges is finding out how to navigate through the city and the county and find out how to identify problems, how to receive assistance, et cetera. And we believe that with the identification of that joint person, to be able to, in effect, do triage through the governments, we'll be able to follow up on the need and respond much more quickly. So I hope that we will very soon be able to finalize that position. And I think that it's important first step in making sure we do have collaboration and cooperation on this issue. As you know, the city has recently moved forward with the purchase of some hotels, has some staff allocated to this endeavor, and one of the things that we've been looking at then here is what role can the county play with this? Are there are there properties? Are there, is there land? How can we become involved and engaged? Noting in the memo that what we're really, we are not focusing on the overall issue, if you will, of homelessness. As we say, there's poverty, there's affordable housing, issues regarding the homeless. What we've been working on most recently, specifically with the community groups as well, is that initial group that is causing problems to our area businesses and to families and individuals. How do we make sure that we are working with the city, with Tucson Police, with the Sheriff's Department to ensure those people are off the street, but a step of that sometimes can be a safe location if it's not, other than the jail, for people to go, and that's part of what we began to look at. So yes, real progress on the position. We think that's occurring, as well as all of the continued discussions between the city and Pima County, and then looking today for, is there direction from the board to say, continue to pursue options, what might be out there as a county resource to provide, and can we begin to, as staff, look for some of the federal funding sources and state as well, from the State Department of Housing, of either grants or funding that could come from reallocation of COVID or additional state and federal dollars to go to the program.
Motion, if we could get you to do that. But again, sanctioned camping, which is the term of art we use for this, has worked in other jurisdictions. The majority of the problem, the majority of the challenge, and where we're seeing these incidences, are within the boundaries of the city of Tucson. Pima County doesn't seem to have that same problem, nor do the other jurisdictions. So I don't know what that says, but what we do know, and we heard very eloquently from our three speakers, that we have a problem, and it's an immediate problem, and our businesses and residents need help, and they're, albeit most of them city residents, but this is a region, and Pima, and it's also a Pima County concern, or should be.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
My concern with the idea of having a large temporary or transitional center is that statistically they aren't working. In most cities, they're not working, because what we're talking about is we're trying to create a solution to a bigger problem, and the biggest problem is we just don't have housing. And so how do we compel some of the people that I think are receiving the largest amount of criticism from community members, from businesses, from people that are running in the park and have tents all over the place, is us creating and investing the kind of resources that we're going to have to do into a shelter like this going to solve that problem? And I don't know that it will. I think the more successful examples are smaller environments where you're having a subgroup of people that have similar demographics. For example, if we had a facility that housed older people in our community, 65, 75, 85, into a smaller, like, 25-person unit that would provide additional supports, medication, those kind of things to smaller groups, it might be a larger investment in the front end, but then we could connect those people to the services that they're likely eligible for and just unable to tap into. If we could tap into creating sort of like a dorm kind of environment for young people that are getting pushed out of the foster care system, that are not living in their homes, 17, 18, 19, if we were to do more workforce development, education, and investment in some smaller groups, it might be a larger investment at the front end, but I do think helping these young people get opportunities for careers and long-term support makes a lot more sense to me than trying to address a very, I think, smaller kind of group that has been sort of pegged with like the difficult to house. I don't know that creating this environment is going to solve that problem. And that's my concern. Is like, does it make sense for us to use a parking lot in the middle of downtown when we're trying to do a lot of investment in revitalization downtown? Does it make sense for us to do that on Broadway, where there's going to be they're doing a lot of construction and it's kind of a smaller space? I was driving by, Mission and Ajo is my way to drive my kids to school, and I was explaining this vote, and that I pointed out the facility, and my 11-year-old said, "But that's a jail." I'm like, well, if that's what his impression is, I don't know if the vast community, especially the people that we're trying to encourage to choose to come in to get services or support or a safe place to sleep, if that's something. I do think that we are a civilized society, a caring community, and I don't think that it's okay for us to have people living on the street in general. But I don't know that this solution is going to be, is one for that. So that's why I wouldn't be in favor of moving towards having a larger temporary shelter. Thank you to Dr. Garcia and Mr. Holmes for walking me and my staff through the facility on Mission. It's huge, but it's very institutional, and it feels that way, and I just don't know if this is the direction that might be, successful. It hasn't worked in other cities.
Actually, it has.
Well, the ones that I've looked at with these large shelters have not. We have looked at different cities that have like sort of KOA kind of camp sort of environments. Some of those on smaller scales have worked as a Band-Aid, but my concern is this solution that we're trying to create, what kind of problems does it create later on?
I can understand your concerns, but I think, and the meeting that was hosted at the LA Town Community Center in Flowing Wells, the group of people that we're talking about, or that they were talking about, that are disrupting their homes, their businesses, are people that deflection hasn't worked for. They may go to deflection, they're out in a day or two, and then they're back on the streets. It's their lifestyle choice, and it is a small section or sector of the homeless population, but they may not want rehabilitation.
No, I understand that, and I guess my concern is, does this facility solve that problem? Are we going to arrest people and detain them because they're homeless? I mean, because that's what this feels like. Because there's no way to compel somebody to participate in this program. And unless we're going to be making different direction to our law enforcement, working with our sheriff's department to do something different, I don't know if the people that you are describing, which I completely agree, there needs to be some action. I just don't know if this is creating a temporary shelter is going to solve that problem.
I don't think there is an immediate solution, but there is an ability to at least give the neighborhoods and the businesses some relief. And you're right, it's a long-term problem. How do we address it? And the whole issue of homelessness, there's so many different groups, but this is the group that is harming businesses and neighborhoods. And I don't know what the overall solution is, the long-term solution, but those businesses and neighborhoods need some relief.
Right, and I don't disagree with that. I guess my concern is this the solution? Are we going to then, how do we compel people to stay in this temporary shelter or transition center? I don't know how to compel them unless we are arresting them and detaining them.
Ms. Lesher.
Chair Bronson, if I may, I'm just looking at perhaps the recommendation for staff today is that we ask that the board direct us to simultaneously pursue a lot of options for temporary shelter and/or the transition of the shelter living of the street living homeless to facilities. And we're asking that we, understanding then that staff is going to be looking at large facilities that we could lease, acquisition of short-term facilities, looking at some of our existing properties, but simply hoping today to get some direction from the board so that we can look at any and all opportunities that might be out there. To again, we're working with the city. They've got pieces of the pie, so do we, and how do we collaborate to make sure that we are addressing the need? So I think what we would be looking for at this time is simply overall direction to begin to pursue all options.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
I would be willing to move a piece of that recommendation, that we request the Board of Supervisors direct staff to collaborate with our law enforcement and court systems and partners to develop a justice model that will help reduce recidivism of the population. My understanding is we do have empty beds. So I don't know if investing $1 million a month in rehabbing the location on Mission or a temporary use of the county property on Miracle Mile is going to be a solution.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
I think this is an example of why we are where we are, because we start getting into the weeds and starting to parse things. Homelessness is homelessness, crime is crime, and we can figure out who's doing what after we address the fact that people are creating havoc on our businesses and our community. We need action. We need action now. We need some sort of relief from the county to address these issues, and by worrying about if they're going to be recidivists or put into a hotel setting or a dorm, what that can come afterwards. But what we need is a strong presence in our community that we will not tolerate this type of behavior, this type of activity, or allow people to perpetrate such bad issues on people, places, and things. And the key to this whole thing is to start acting, to start communicating, engaging all of the NCOs and all of the homeless shelters and all of the people that deal with this. And believe me, there are a lot of them, and they've been sucking up a lot of public money. But it needs to be done. It needs to be addressed now. And we can worry about the delineation of who goes where, what, and when later. But we have to show this community, particularly the business community, that we are ready to act and act now. So I applaud your position, Madam Chair, and I support whatever motion you would like to address as far as direction to the staff.
Well, I think we've already given direction. I don't think we need a motion. Ms. Lesher, did you want a motion, or you got direction? Your preference.
Well, Chair Bronson, if understanding that what I'm hearing today, we can look at a variety of options, including law enforcement and the court systems and such, but that obviously any specific recommendations or acquisitions would come back to the board for approval, but that we should we should continue to collaborate with the city, look at what we've got available, and then see where we can identify ways to make sure that we're getting people into safe and humane facilities quickly.
And Madam Chair, very quickly, we have the juvenile wing of the Pima County Justice System that we no longer had to use. It was an institutional setting, and we reimagined it to provide for asylum seekers so that it would not appear to be intimidating because it was a quote-unquote jail. We also have another juvenile building adjacent to that. That can be reimagined too, so as to not make it look like it's an institutionalized jail. We have facilities to accommodate many different types of these gradations of homelessness, of age, of socioeconomic factors. But the point we have to get across to our community and convey strongly is we are ready to take action and do something about it now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think you've got your direction. So,
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to clarify, Supervisor Grijalva, had you made a motion?
I did. I think
Was there a second to that motion?
No, there was not a second.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
could I request a 2-minute break?
2-minute break?
You can count.
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay,
I'll be right back.
Okay, got it. this, and
I'm going to talk to you
we
after.
can resume this meeting.
I have to leave for my observation.
Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
All right, we're going to move on to item 2, Constable Justice Precinct 10. Item A is acceptance of the resignation of the Honorable Michael Stevenson, effective October 22nd, 2022. I will move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, we've accepted the resignation. We now move on to 2B, discussion, direction, action regarding a selection process to fill the vacancy of Constable Justice Precinct 10.
Chair Bronson?
Yes.
I'm wondering if we can ask our county attorney for an opinion on whether we are required to have constables, whether if we fill the job duties with, as been discussed with deputies or somebody else that are county employees. My concern is that we have a smaller number of constables that are serving all of Pima County. I think we have 3 at this point that are actively, as I understand it. So maybe getting a report from our county administrator on what the situation is right now. But my worry is that, we've had issues in the constable's office for a variety of reasons, and I just don't know if we can move away from this model, and legally if we can move away from the model.
I don't think we can at this point, but the county attorney can weigh in. I will tell you that what we have done previously with the selection process is we ask applicants for the position that they meet the following requirements: 18 years of age or older at time of appointment, literate in English, registered to vote in the precinct, resident of the precinct, same political party as the person vacating the office. In this case, it's a Republican. And then number 2, we ask interested parties to file with the clerk of the board a letter of interest, a resume, and a financial disclosure statement. And if we were to fill this, the submission deadline should be Friday, November 4th, 2022. And the clerk of the board will advertise the selection process in the territorial newspaper October 21st through the 31st of 2022, and will post the information on the county homepage. Information regarding how to submit public comments will be included. If requested, we can ask the League of Women Voters to conduct a forum for the candidates, scheduling it for the week of November 7th, and then the Board of Supervisors can make the appointment at our meeting on November 15th, 2022, and the person appointed will serve through December 31st, 2024. So that is normally how we do this. What's the pleasure of the board? Supervisor Grijalva is wondering if we have to fill the position. Can we get an answer to that now, or do we need to? Can you, Mr. Brown, can you respond?
Yes, Chair, Supervisor Grijalva. The constables are required by statute. There are some functions that can be delegated out to other agencies, such as the Sheriff's Department. We can provide a more detailed memo if that's required.
So you're saying we have to fill the position, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor.
Do we know when Constable Stevenson's term was set to expire?
Yes, December 31st, 2024.
So this is substantial. And we hear this talk about doing away with the constables. These are duly elected officials. What process is available or even allowed that can completely eliminate the constables?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we can look into that, but I believe it would be a statutory change coming from the legislature.
That's my understanding as well, so it would have to go through the legislature. Supervisor Grijalva made a very good point, that she's concerned, as am I, about a reduced number of constables having an increased amount of workload. Therefore, I think it's incumbent upon this board to find a replacement for Constable Stevenson immediately to help alleviate that inequitable workload. So I would move that the requirements or the procedure that Madam Chair just recited be voted into an action item.
So you're making a motion to proceed with the constable selection process for JP10 as I outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grijalva.
Can we check in with presiding constable before he leaves on October 22nd, Constable Stevenson, about any suggestions? I know that he'd been working on trying to come up with, some sort of collaboration, some agreement. Since they're all elected officials in their own right, I think it's very difficult to coordinate that office. And it's been, so if he can, before he leaves, highlight some of those concerns, maybe give us some suggestions on how we move forward. I'm just very concerned about it because there's a lot of increasingly law enforcement sort of requirements, and that's not required as part of his job. It's not something that we have to consider.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor.
I agree wholeheartedly with Supervisor Grijalva's comments and observations. However, I would support that. However, I don't want that to be something that's going to hold up the reappointment process. But I echo Supervisor Grijalva's concerns, and I think it would be very helpful and beneficial. As someone who's been the presiding constable, who's been there a while, who's experienced the office, can shed his insights and his ideas on and suggestions on how this whole system can be addressed in a much more positive manner.
And maybe also highlight some of the duties that perhaps could be delegated to, process servers or somebody else. Because I am worried that, we don't require any law enforcement background, but they're issued weapons if they go through a process. That's, we have different ideologies on how this position should be kind of run. You have some that work more as like a social worker and another that works more like enforcement. And so trying to come up with some consistency.
I think you're looking for, Madam Chair, Supervisor Grijalva, you're looking for kind of an exit interview. Mm-hmm. And I would then move to fill the position.
Okay, we've got a motion, and I've seconded it to fill the position as I outlined. And if there's no further discussion, let's do a roll call.
Okay, Madam Chair, before we do the roll call, I just wanted to clarify the position is advertised in the Daily Territorial twice, on October 24th and October 31st. Okay, roll call.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to item 4, location change to Voter Center 044 for our 2022 general election. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to facilities management and item number 5, Tucson Airport Authority. I will move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor.
Yeah, I'm confused or concerned about this particular item. And I support the Sheriff's Department having the most up-to-date tools to keep our community safe, but this is a ground lease. My first question is, why is this ground lease not going to the real estate department and county administration, but yet it's over in facilities management being coordinated there on this ground lease?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, leases are handled within the Facilities Management Department. There's personnel who manage leases within that department.
And real estate has nothing to do with any of that?
Supervisor Christie, real estate does become involved, and I think Deputy County Administrator DeBonis can explain the process.
Supervisor Christie and Chair Bronson, both departments have lease staff in them, so they coordinate together. This is a ground lease that will have a hangar constructed on it that will be owned by Pima County, so that's why Facilities Management is involved in the ground lease portion of it. They're building the project on behalf of the Sheriff's Department, but there is good coordination between Real Property Services and Facilities Management on these types of leases.
Madam Chair, Mr. DeBonis, thank you for that explanation, and it leads me, thank you, to my next question. It says here that we are entering into a 30-year lease agreement with Tucson Airport Authority for a sheriff's hangar, which county will construct. And the hangar will accommodate sheriff's newest, larger fixed wing. I haven't seen anything about a new hangar being constructed. How much does it cost? What's wrong with the old one? When was that decided? And where is it going to be? And all of a sudden we've got the ground lease, and it's, oh, we're going to put a hangar on it. When did that happen?
Supervisor Christie, so there were a series of actions set in motion over the past several years. The Sheriff Department, with board approval, purchased new aircraft. That aircraft is larger than which will fit in existing hangar facilities. The hangar project is included in the capital project portion of the board-approved annual budget, so that is reflected in there as a line item project. I don't know the cost of that project offhand, but we can easily get that information back to the board.
Well, when there are, just for my own edification, when there are capital projects that have been approved and they show up under some other heading, for instance, a ground lease, it would be helpful if there was some notation that this was part of the capital project's improvement, so I know at least it has been discussed. And you don't recall the amount of the construction project?
Supervisor Christie, I don't have that dollar amount offhand, but we'll get that to you. And your point is noted about referencing both the lease side of it as well as the capital project side.
And why is the ground lease coming out of the general fund?
Supervisor Christie and board members, I believe that's because it's related to the sheriff operation, so that would be part of the sheriff's
budget,
allocated budget, which is general fund.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Bronson.
Supervisor.
So we're approving a 30-year term, $1.3 million, so it's $43,000 a year roughly just for to rent the space. Is that right?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Grijalva, I haven't done the math, but it sounds approximately correct.
Okay. And then I do think that it would be helpful for when we talk about what the public benefit is or the need for the item. I don't want to make this process a lot harder, but staff had to call Facilities Management, then call the Sheriff's Department, then come back. I mean, there wasn't one person that we could go to and that explained, this is why. So it would be helpful if the attachments had that information. I don't want to make it more complicated, but really something as simple as we used to have one Cessna and a helicopter, now we have 3 in a helicopter, and it just won't fit in the hangar would sort of solve the problem the need for that information for me anyway.
Noted.
Thanks.
All right. There's no further discussion. Call the question. Roll call.
This is for approval of Addendum 5.
Item number 5.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to item 6, procurement, 10X Software Solutions. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
What I'm gleaning from this particular item is that with Madam Director, we had discussions about a project manager. I believe it was at the last board meeting, and my recollection is that you felt that that was a valid position to look for in the process of having a projects manager. Is this what you're presenting to be a projects manager?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, no. What this is additional help for my staff to meet the timeline for getting everything set up and tested for the election. So it's one individual that will come in to assist us.
That works for 10X?
They work for 10X. They have the knowledge and expertise, yes.
So they're tech support?
Basically, yes, sir.
So doesn't that normally come when you purchase a system that you get tech support with it?
Supervisor Christie, yes, but there were a lot of things that were not incorporated into this contract, and where we are right now with the time frame that we have, it was an additional support that we needed. So the support that they provide remotely, we still get that, but this was a request to have them actually physically on site.
So at this particular point, Madam Chair, Madam Director, is that there's no plans to appoint or hire a quote-unquote projects manager?
Supervisor Christie, yes, there is. There just was not time before this election to find somebody with the expertise that we need.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director.
Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Roll call.
Madam Chair, I still need a motion.
Oh,
I'll move the item.
I'll second. Sorry.
Okay, this is for approval.
Right.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines? Supervisor Hines? Let the record show Supervisor
Oh, yeah,
there
there
he
we
is.
go.
Thank you. Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Moving on to board, commission, and/or committees, items 7 through 12. If nobody wishes to divide the question, I'll move those items.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor.
Is there, Mr. Brown, is there an issue with, you raised it in a memorandum, does something need to be removed here on these, or are they all available for approval?
You're talking about items 11 and 12?
Yes. Which would you were going to approve all of those, 7 through 12?
Well, and you're,
And I'm talking about...
yeah, I'll
I'm
withdraw
sorry.
my motion.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
9 through 12.
9 through 12 is, I think, your question, so I'll move items 7 and 8.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
This is for approval of addendum 7 and 8. Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines? Supervisor Hines? Thank you. Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-0, 7 and 8 have carried. Moving on to 9, 10, 11, and 12. Mr. Brown, I think Supervisor Christie had some questions.
Yeah, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie. It's a complicated issue. Item 9 would reappoint Mr. Helen as a member of the commission and the council. I think that's clean. Item 10 through 12 is different because we have issues of the board appointing versus the board approving a chair for the 5 different boards that are at issue here, or the 4 boards in the council. According to statute, the head of the Corrections Officers Retirement Board should be appointed by the board chair and then approved by the board. But according to, so that's one of the 4, or one of the 5. The Merit Commission should elect its own chair, according to Pima County Code. And according to statute, the Law Enforcement Merit System Council should also approve its own chair. So the issue is really with the board appointing the chair, not necessarily appointing Mr. Helen as a member. But again, the problem is there's one statute that allows the board chair to appoint and then the board to approve. There's another statute in the Pima County Code, as applies to different boards, where those boards really should be choosing their own chair.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Mr. Brown, so it probably would be best on 10 through 12, 10 through 12,
Continue.
to probably withdraw them and let those commissions and boards elect their own chair, as it's not in the purview of this board to elect a chair.
Yes, Supervisor Christie, except for the Correction Officers Retirement Board, where the board chair can, by statute, appoint. So
When
that-
you say board chair, which board chair?
I'm sorry, the Chair Bronson.
Okay.
Board of Supervisors Chair.
Okay.
And if Chair Bronson, on that particular item, does not appoint, will that group or that commission appoint its own chair?
No, I think I have to appoint.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're doing this the
I
right
do
way.
too.
So
and I think
should-
we can do item 9. I'll move item 9.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I do have some information on this. So our office did confirm with the coordinator of the Merit System Commission and Law Enforcement Merit System Council that Michael Hallen is their chair. And they will meet again and appoint a new chair in January of 2023.
So I don't know how that clarifies anything. All we're doing is, the item 9 is the reappointment of Mr. Helen to the Merit Commission System Council.
Yes, so the other committees do choose their own chair. He doesn't serve as the chair for the other committees. Or he's not appointed, correct.
So basically, we can't move on items 10, 11, and 12.
If I may, Chair Bronson, so on item 10, you could appoint Mike Helen and the board could vote to approve him.
Okay, I'm not willing to do that at this point. But I've moved item 9, which is the reappointment of Mr. Helen.
And I've seconded it.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Chair Bronson, is Mr. Helen's term ending on the other commissions?
It's expired.
So could you just reappoint him for the term, and then the chairmanship gets settled some other way? Or do you want to just pull it and push it for a later time?
No, what I'd like to do is make sure that number 9 passes, and then 10 and 11, 12 be dealt with the individual commission.
Okay.
But does he need to be reappointed to those commissions? Because his term is expiring?
That he has those positions on those commissions by virtue of number 9 being on the Merit Commission.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 9, reappointment of Mike Helen.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. So I think what Supervisor Grijalva is saying is you reappoint him on the Merit System Commission, then you also have to reappoint him on the other commissions. I don't think necessarily it's going to carry over unless the board makes a motion on that. Am I
Well, I'm
correct?
not willing to make a motion on 10, 11, or 12 today.
Okay.
Okay, so, but his appointments on these 3 commissions are coterminous with his current term on the Merit System Commission.
I don't care.
Okay.
We need to deal with this a little more. We shouldn't be dealing with this in this way.
Yeah, the board that underneath those headings can deal with it.
Yep. All right, item 9 is reappointment. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Okay, Supervisor Christie?
Yes?
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-0, motion carries. Items 10, 11, and 12, I think rather than,
Would it be
Can we-
appropriate to withdraw them?
yeah, can we withdraw them? I think we can either continue.
Or continue.
Yeah. We'll continue for our next board meeting for purposes of clarification. So.
Fair enough.
I move to continue items 10, 11, 12
Second?
to our board meeting of November 1st, is it?
That's correct.
Okay. There's a motion to continue. Any discussion? Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes?
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-0, motion carries. That brings us to the conclusion of today's board meeting. If there are no objections, this meeting stands adjourned. We'll see you November 1st.